So the lifestyle of the Hungarians, I would say it's pretty similar to what we have here in the States. Kids go to school, the parents try to work, they have family time. They're people just like we are. And so a lot of the things they do are a lot of the things that we would do, that they want to be happy. They want to have success in life. And so they eat like we do. So they're people. They do have, obviously, their culture to go along with it. And so their day-to-day activities could vary from what we do. Rather than just going out maybe once every other week or every week to go get their groceries, it's a lot easier for them to go get things fresh every day. So they have these markets and the bakeries that they can go to, and so they can get fresh produce, fresh baked goods every day. And so a lot of the people will do that. And it's fun to see that. Like, we'd be out street contacting, and we'd pass the market, and there's just all these great people just doing their daily shopping, getting their food for the day. Work is also, it can be hard to come by for the people. There's quite a bit of unemployment. And so it really just depends on who you are for the family, if they're going to have work, or if what they're going to do each day. Because if they need work, either they'll go out searching for it, or maybe they stay home and do the home duties while hopefully their spouse is out working. But it can be hard. That can be a challenge, the work field. Yeah, the kids go to school just like they do here in the United States. But yeah, it is a little bit different there, how the school works. I think they have an extra grade there that they go to. I thought it was interesting that they don't typically serve food. Like, they don't have the cafeteria for the students at their schools. They take their own food. So they have like a little bit of release time between each class, at least the schools that I was in, because sometimes we had the opportunity to teach English in the schools. There was one city where it worked out perfectly. We were able to go about once or twice a week to teach some of the teenagers in their high school. And that was when I became aware of it. I was like, oh, they don't have lunchtime, like they don't have a cafeteria. And they're like, yeah, we just eat in between our classes. And rather than them going up and moving to different classrooms for a different subject, the teachers came to them. So there was a specific class where they were in, that was their classroom, and then the teachers would rotate classrooms. So that was interesting. I don't know if that's every school in the country, but I found that to be common, for that to be the procedure. And something else interesting that I really loved about the culture there was shops would close for the weekend. Like on Saturdays they were open till a certain point, but it was like once it became evening, once it was getting later in the day, a lot of the stores would close, which I thought was interesting, because that's not something common that I would see here back home. A lot of the malls are open, a lot of the grocery stores stay open, so that people can still do what they want to do like on any other day. But over there it was the custom for these shops to close. And sometimes the restaurants would stay open later, but it was neat because it showed that they actually cared about having family time. They wanted to be home with their families. They wanted to have a break from the busy day-to-day things they do throughout the week. And so on Sundays, the city seemed so dead sometimes. It was like there wasn't so much going on because people wanted to be with their families. And that was more noticeable in the smaller cities. I'm sure that in Budapest it wasn't as common. I wasn't ever really in Buda or Pest on Sundays. I served in Kispest when I was in the big city. But there were smaller places like Szolnok and Kecskemét, and even in Pécs, these different cities I served in, everything just seemed so mellow. And if you went out and saw people out and about, they were usually with their families, like with their kids going on walks or on their way to their church services, because the Catholics, they would have their services, and the Reformists. And so that was something I really liked, that the weekends they actually respected that a lot more than at least I tend to see here. So that was neat.
So when I first got to Hungary, I thought it would be like completely different than living in the US, but it's been pretty built up. It's getting more and more Americanized. So like shopping, I had no idea what to expect about shopping, but they have grocery stores just like we do here. One interesting thing is they also have just random stores. So they'll have like a meat store, kind of like a butcher shop, or a flower store, just for selling flowers, just on the side of the street. They have bakeries everywhere. You can pretty much find anything that you find in a grocery store in a specific shop, just somewhere in town, or you can go to a grocery store. So it's kind of, there you can see like the traditional aspect of shopping in Hungary. Most of the older men and women, go to these specific shops like every day or every other day. So they go to their fruit and vegetable stand, and then they go over to the meat shop, and then they go over to the bakery, and that's kind of how they do their shopping. Most of the younger generation is going more towards the supermarket aspect, where you can just get all your stuff in one. In some of my areas, the grocery store is more convenient. In some of my areas, just going across the street to the meat shop or the fruit and vegetable stand was a lot more convenient, and most of the time that was the better stuff anyway. So housing, I lived in quite a bit of different apartments. Some apartments were just, in alleys, but then because of communism, there was a need for mass housing, so they built big 10-story buildings and 5-story buildings, and I would say most of the apartments that I lived in were in those big block buildings. Has central heating, so everyone gets the same heating, central water. The 5-story buildings don't have elevators usually, so there was one area where I lived on the top of a 5-story building, so there's a lot of walking. 10-story buildings had elevators. Some of them were kind of sketchy, but they worked pretty well. Transportation. Hungary has really, really good public transportation. Depending on the city that you have, or the city that you serve in, it's going to be a little bit different. But we rode a lot of buses, city buses. If it was a bigger city, we would ride buses. If it was a smaller city, most of the time we would walk. Some of the areas had bikes. Some of the cities that I served in, everyone just had a bike. No one owned a car, and so it was just bikes everywhere, which is kind of cool to see. One of my favorite things in Hungary was riding trains. For all our transfers, or anytime we needed to get back to Budapest, we would ride a train. The way it works is Budapest is kind of the hub of everything, and then you have train lines that just go out to the rest of the country. And so wherever you are, if you need to go to Budapest, you just ride a train. And trains were something that I was unfamiliar with before my mission. The first time I stepped on a train, going to my first area, I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. I remember going back up for some conference or something in Budapest and getting to ride in one of the kind of like the compartments in a train, kind of like in Harry Potter. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Also on a train you don't get lots of bumps at all. It's a really smooth ride most of the time. And just looking out at the Hungarian countryside, most of the time I would just stare out the window. And it was beautiful, whatever season you're in, Hungary is beautiful. One of the coolest things is if you're going through the west or the middle part of the country, especially in the summer, one of their big industries is sunflower oil, and so there will just be fields and fields of sunflowers as far as you can see. And I don't know of anywhere in the United States where you can really experience that. One of their other big industries is poppies, or poppy seed. They eat a lot of poppy seed and export it as well. And so you'll see fields of red poppies, or sometimes you'll see on the train tracks just poppies just growing up on the train tracks, even though there's not poppy fields for miles. They just get blown in the wind. And that was really picturesque and pretty artistic just to see that. Just those little things that I miss about Hungary. I would say most of the things in Hungary are a lot cheaper than the US. Food is definitely cheaper. Housing is cheaper. McDonald's is a little bit more expensive just because I guess it's not Hungarian. But it really depends on where you go. The monetary system, they use something called the Hungarian forint. And right now, I think the exchange rate is somewhere around 280 forint to $1. It took a little while to get used to that. You have like a 10,000 forint bill, and it seems like a lot of money. It's about $45 or something like that. And so it was interesting coming back to the US and getting used to the dollar again as well. So I'd have to like convert dollars to forint to know what I was getting. They use a lot of coins, coins and bills, but you probably shouldn't pay with all coins. Sometimes they get mad. Hungary's kind of split up between the western half and the eastern half. Western half is it's a little bit more hilly, a little bit more green, and the eastern half is a little bit more grassy and stuff like that. As far as weather is concerned, it's not too much different than here. Highs and lows wise, it doesn't snow a whole lot. It is more humid than Utah, so when it's hot, it feels a lot more hot. When it's cold, it feels a lot colder. Other than that, there wasn't too many extremes. Nothing that I wasn't prepared for before I went out. I love the people. Again, they're a little bit more closed off at first, but once you develop a relationship or begin that relationship, they become your best friends for life. They're super, super generous in everything. They just want you to be as comfortable as you are. I don't know, I talk with them all the time still, and they're my favorite people.
So the weather in Hungary, so I kind of had this picture in my head of what Hungary looked like year round, and it was just blizzard and snow, and I thought I was going to be tracting and streeting in the snow and just freezing my butt off. And that's just how I pictured Hungary. And I remember I got there in the summertime. I got there in July. That's when it was. And it was summertime, and it was really, really hot. I was not expecting that. Flying into Hungary, I saw these green trees and everything. I expected to see, everything just dead and white and gray and stuff. But no, it definitely wasn't like that. It was beautiful in the summertime. It was really humid, especially in Budapest, because you have the Danube that just runs through right there. And so there's a lot of the moisture that comes from that. Gets in the air, gets really hot when you're streeting in Budapest. I mean, the summer was beautiful. It was really hot, but it was beautiful. There's a lot of sunflower fields everywhere in Hungary. So if you're on the trains and stuff, you look out left to your right, you just see tons of like sunflower fields. And that was really beautiful to see in the summertime. The wintertime, though, was actually really cold. So I was wrong about it being year-round, but I wasn't wrong about the wintertime. It really is that cold. I remember I actually fell on my butt a couple times walking through the snow, just slipping, and fell like 4 or 5 times in one day. I remember it was really, really rough. And it was really just like gloomy, and it was really dark. And yeah, it was just, I don't know. It's tough in the wintertime. Missionary work is definitely hard there. It's definitely easy to get down on yourself, a lot easier, to become depressed. But you just have to keep on looking at the goal. You just have to keep on focusing on these people, and know that, Satan can use the weather to keep you from doing missionary work. He can use a lot of things to do that, but the weather is definitely one of them, especially in Hungary. The fall was beautiful. I think the fall is the prettiest time, all the colored leaves and all the buildings, beautiful buildings, European architecture. It was really, really pretty. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it goes year round. So you have all the seasons in there. So you're going to get everything. It's not like Hawaii where it's, just one temperature pretty much year round. You get everything. So, yeah. Housing and transportation, no, it's a lot different. So if you were to look at, so a good way to describe the Hungarian economy, it's like they're like about 30 years behind us, middle class. So, I mean, that's the average. That's like the average person. So there are a lot of buildings that were built by the Russians when they occupied Hungary during World War II. And a lot of Hungarians live inside of them, especially in Erd. If you go to like the outer cities in towns around Budapest, you'll find a lot of that. And they're panel apartments. And I mean, it's really sad to see people living in that, because I mean, they're really, really. I lived in one in Aird, and so I got to experience firsthand, and it was really tough. We had no AC. The carpet it was pretty bad. Our faucet didn't work. There was almost everything in the apartment basically wasn't working. And so a lot of people live in those, and you'll just see building after building after building after building of apartments. And you're just like, wow, I think in one building I tracked it, there was like 200 rooms. So there's a lot of those. A lot of people live in those. The Hungarian economy is really tough right now. A lot of people are working more than one job. But I mean, they're the hardest working people I've ever seen. Here, you don't really see old people walking around all the time. You know, they're always in a retirement home, or, just knitting or something. I don't know, whatever they do. In Hungary, you see them around everywhere. The old ladies are walking. They could have like the worst, case of, they could have the worst case of scoliosis, but they're just walking around everywhere and going grocery shopping and just doing things like that. And it's really impressive to see. They love the outdoors. They love talking to people. The old people love talking to the missionaries. And I mean, they're the most lively people, some of the most lively people I've ever met. Once you crack that shell, they do have a shell around them that's kind of, it's like, oh, why are you talking to me? But when you can actually, start making them feel comfortable around you, and when they do feel comfortable, everything from there they can't get enough of you. So that was the cool thing about Hungarians is they just, once you break that shell, once you get to know them, they trust you, then it's like they never want you to leave. And that was really cool. It was hard sometimes with the members, though, like in cities and stuff like that, because they didn't want certain missionaries to ever leave, and they took it really, really serious and personal. But yeah, the Hungarian people are great. The living is really, really tough for some people. For other people, it's really great. I mean, there's a lot of beautiful houses in Hungary. They look a lot different. They don't really have you know how your typical, American home is, it's front yard, backyard, and that's it. I mean, in Utah, there's like no fence or anything like that. Hungarians, they have a huge fence around where they live, and their houses, it doesn't really have like a front to it. It does, a lot of houses do, I guess, there, but you'll see a lot of the houses don't have a front to it, and the doors are actually a lot different. I had a door in my first apartment, and it kind of looked like a couch. It had like little buttons and stuff on it. And they don't really have doorknobs as much as we have here. They're just kind of, it's like you put your key in, unlock the door, then you pull the little handle that's there. So that's another thing that's different about Hungary. And on the streets and stuff, and a lot of the condos and things like that, we would have to knock on people's windows, because their door would be on the complete other side of the house in their backyard. So their front door was like a gate, and you could ring the doorbell, but in order for them to come out, they'd have to go out the back and then come around and open the gate. And so you can imagine how frustrated some people got during the wintertime. Like, who's knocking on my door at 6 o'clock at night? It's missionaries. That's definitely the last thing that they want to hear. But yeah, so that's kind of how some of the houses are, how the apartments are. And yeah, the transportation, let's see, a lot of people travel by train. They call them Villamos or Vonat. We took a lot of buses. I did have a car my last 8 months as a missionary. It was my last 8 months. So we do have cars. So, but before that, I was always taking the bus. I was always, taking the trams, taking the trains, the metro, everywhere. So we had to get, they call them berlets, and it's I don't know. It's like a pass. It's just a pass, like an all-around pass for everything. You can use anything, anytime for like a month. And so you definitely use public transportation a lot when you first get into the mission field. But I loved it. Because, you get to talk to people on trains. In a car and a bike, you're just kind of by yourself, riding. But when you're on a train, you can talk to all kinds of people. I remember I was so excited to see my first Hungarian on a train when I first got on it. I literally talked to her for the whole train ride to my first area. And my first area is the farthest, it's one of the farthest away from Budapest. We just talked forever and I loved it. I couldn't speak like a Hungarian, but obviously like certain words and phrases and stuff, but it's really cool how like I was able to communicate with her even though I didn't really speak the language. So speaking to people on buses, speaking to people on trains, that's really awesome. And I definitely miss that once I was able to start driving. Yeah, so the produce is a lot more organic than here in the US. It goes bad a lot faster. Housing is a lot cheaper than the US. I knew some Americans that just moved to Hungary for the housing. It's really, really cheap living. But the food is about the same, if not more expensive. So it's even harder for Hungarians. I think minimum wage there is, I think about the dollar, it's like $4.95 or something like that. I don't know, something really, really low. That's a good job, I think. I don't know. It's somewhere around there, $4, $3. So a lot of them have about 3 jobs, and they have to pay for things. Besides their living, everything's just as costly as everything here in the U.S. Like I said, if not more expensive. If you want to get a Nike shirt there, it costs like $40 for just like a Nike t-shirt, because it's shipped all the way from the US and they put it in to Hungary and stuff, so it costs a little bit more. Clothing is definitely a lot more expensive there.